some of the nonsense that passes for breaking news today would not be worth the paper it was printed on if anybody bothered to print news these days. One silly question that I get from reporters is it true that you got angry and emotional a few times over the past 2 years? Heck yes, didn't you?
Rod Rosenstein taking a swing at the media last night, perhaps because he knew that this Washington Post report was coming out, which details the lengths Rosenstein went to in order to keep his job last year after the New York Times reported that he had suggested wearing a wire to secretly record the president. According to the Post, Rosenstein got quote, teary-eyed in a meeting with Trump's then chief of staff, John Kelly, although a DOJ official disputes that account, and then in a phone call with Trump, sought to assure the president he was on his team and told the president he would make sure he was treated fairly. Joining me now is Washington Post national correspondent Phil Bump, who contributed to that Rosenstein report. Philip, good to see you. In the report, I just want to read you a part about it. Rosenstein tells Trump, "I can give the investigation credibility," Rosenstein said, in the words of one administration official, offering their own characterization of the call. "I can land the plane." This, of course, coming on the heels of the reporting that Rod Rosenstein had offered to wear this wire. Rod Rosenstein gets called in. He's being told, or it's been suggested, that he is going to have to resign or he's going to get fired. And he's now trying to convince the president, "You got to keep me. I'm good for you."
Yes, that's right. So the Post report goes into detail about what that moment actually looked like. And obviously, this is a moment that, I mean, it's sort of hard to imagine having your boss hear these things about you and being a sort of person who's very publicly going to call you out on it. Obviously, there's tension there. But I think in that moment, too, there were two conflicting tensions within Rosenstein himself. There's obviously the fact that he had this job and he wanted to keep his job, but he also had helped initiate this entire probe. He was the person who chose Mueller, in part because of concern about how the Russia investigation could be protected. And I think that it's probably the case as well that part of Rosenstein was trying to ensure that he was still able to maintain that protection over the investigation as well. I mean, there is a lot of complexity here. The article also goes on to note, that Rosenstein has been sort of generous to Trump even after he's announced that he's leaving, which a lot of people were sort of surprised by. There's a lot of complexity there. I think that moment encapsulates it well.
So I guess the question when reading that article or listening to Rod Rosenstein last night or seeing him behind William Barr, the Attorney General, when he was talking about holding the press conference about the Mueller report, trying to understand who Rod Rosenstein is. What do you come away from? Was he a guy who was desperate to save his job or not be sent out in disgrace, and hence was saying things to endear himself to the president? Or what's his role in this thing? Because this is about the most important thing that Rod Rosenstein will ever have been involved in.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I think he recognizes certainly that this is his legacy. This is this investigation to a large extent. This is someone who had been working with the Department of Justice for well over 20 years. He is a lifer. He was an institutionalist. He served as a U.S. attorney in Maryland prior to becoming the Deputy Attorney General. He's someone who was very invested. At the speech last night, you could hear he was speaking to a room full of people who similarly many of them had held government jobs, were attorneys, were U.S. attorneys, were professionals, were judges, and you could hear him talking about these institutions and expressing how he felt about them and how much they meant to him. And I think that is a primary motivation. This is someone who, he explained, he was standing behind Barr, and everyone commented while Barr was giving that press conference how stone-faced Rosenstein was. And he said last night, well, the reason I was doing that is because my job is to stand there and be stone-faced. And that I think encapsulates a decent amount of who Rod Rosenstein is. He is the guy who, if his job is to stand there stone-faced, he's going to stand there stone-faced. And so I think that, yes, it is the case that he was in this point of tension with a very unusual boss, which I think anyone would acknowledge. But again, at the same time, he had this investigation that he really did. He wanted to land that plane. He helped that plane take off, and he wanted to make sure it got back to the ground safely.
Philip, thank you for your reporting. As always, Phil Bump of the Washington Post.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.